There is a particular kind of evil that is far more terrifying than the kind you can see coming. Not the stranger in the shadows, not the obvious threat, but the kind that sits across from you at a neighborhood barbecue, waves from the driveway, and shakes your hand at church. The kind that has a wife, a daughter, a job, and a bowling night. Dennis Rader was that kind of evil. For more than 30 years, he terrorized Wichita, Kansas, murdering at least 10 people in crimes so calculated and controlled that investigators were left utterly baffled. And he didn't just kill, he wanted the world to know about it. He sent letters to newspapers, mailed packages to police, wrote poems about his own murders, gave himself a nickname, and dared an entire city to find him. For 3 decades, they couldn't. This is the story of BTK, bind, torture, kill. A story about ego, obsession, and the desperate hunger for recognition that ultimately destroyed him. Chapter 1: A city that didn't know it was being hunted. It was a cold January morning in 1974, when a 15-year-old boy named Charlie Otero came home from school and found his entire family dead. His parents, Joseph and Julie, and 2 of his younger siblings had all been killed inside their own home. The scene was so controlled, so deliberately arranged, that police understood immediately this was no robbery or moment of passion. Someone had come in with a plan, carried it out with complete calm, and simply left. There was no forced entry, no obvious motive. Joseph Otero was a former Air Force man with combat experience, and even he hadn't been able to stop what happened. Investigators worked the case hard, but kept hitting walls. Then, months later, a tip came in about a letter hidden inside a book at the local public library, and inside that letter was something that changed everything. It had been written by the killer. He described the murders in explicit detail, things only the person responsible could have known, and the tone wasn't one of guilt or confession. It read more like a complaint. He was frustrated that his work hadn't been recognized, annoyed that no one had given him credit. He wanted a name, and he'd already chosen one. He signed off with 3 letters: BTK. Bind, torture, kill. From that moment, investigators understood they weren't just dealing with a killer. They were dealing with a killer who needed an audience. And after each one, the letters kept coming. To newspapers, to police, left in public places waiting to be found. Some contained drawings. Some were written like poems. All of them were unsettling in the same specific way. This wasn't just a man committing crimes, it was a man performing them, documenting them, demanding that the world pay attention. And yet, despite all of this contact, police couldn't find him. Without modern forensic technology, without digital trails, every lead eventually went cold. Wichita lived under a shadow, knowing that somewhere among them was a man who had killed multiple times and showed no sign of stopping. And then, without warning, he vanished. Chapter 2: The Ghost Years. The last confirmed BTK murder was in January 1991. After that, nothing. No more killings. No more letters. Just silence. In some ways, the silence was worse. When a killer like BTK simply stops, there's no explanation that puts anyone's mind at rest. Had he died? Been imprisoned for something unrelated? Or had he just gone home, closed the door, and resumed an ordinary life as though nothing had ever happened? That last possibility turned out to be exactly right. Dennis Rader stayed in Wichita. He kept his job as a local government compliance officer, a role that gave him authority to enter people's homes, which he apparently enjoyed rather too much. He was active in his church, eventually becoming president of the church council. He was a husband and a father. He attended community meetings and had opinions about planning regulations. By every measure, he was a normal, slightly pompous, unremarkable middle-aged man. People who knew him described him as rigid and rule-obsessed, but not dangerous. Not someone who made you uneasy. Inside, he had never stopped being BTK. What investigators would later piece together was a portrait of extraordinary compartmentalization. The murders, the letters, the whole performance of it, all walled off from his daily life while he maintained a completely convincing mask to everyone around him. He hadn't reformed. He had simply paused, waiting for the moment when the need to be seen again became impossible to ignore. That moment arrived in 2004. Before we get into what happened next, if you're enjoying the story so far, take a second to hit the like button. It really does help the video reach more people. And if you want more true stories like this one, subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss one. It takes 2 seconds and it means a lot. Now, back to Dennis Rader. Chapter 3: The Comeback. A local journalist was working on a retrospective piece marking 30 years since the Otero murders. Books were being discussed. A television project was in development. Wichita was revisiting its most infamous chapter, and people were talking about BTK in the past tense as if the story was over. Rader couldn't stand it. In March 2004, a letter arrived at the Wichita Eagle, the same paper that had received his communications 3 decades earlier. It left no doubt. BTK was back. Over the following months, more arrived. Letters to television stations, packages to police, photographs, drawings, documents referencing old crimes to prove he was the same person. The tone was more erratic than before, arrogant and needy at the same time, like a man frustrated that the world had moved on without him. For investigators, it was both a breakthrough and a warning. New material meant new potential evidence, but it also raised the obvious question of whether the murders were about to start again. Police played it carefully. They kept communication open, let him feel in control, and waited for the mistake that someone this arrogant was almost certain to make, and then they helped him make it. Rader sent a message asking whether a floppy disk, yes, an actual floppy disk, could be traced back to him if he used one. Police responded publicly, no, it was completely safe. He believed them entirely. Chapter 4: 1. Stupid mistake. A purple floppy disk arrived at a local TV station shortly after. Investigators loaded it up and went straight for the metadata, the hidden information embedded in digital files that most people don't even know exists, quietly recording details about when a document was created and on what machine. What they found pointed to Christ Lutheran Church in Park City, Kansas. And attached to the file was a name: Dennis. It wasn't proof, but it was a thread. They pulled it. Through Rader's daughter. Investigators obtained a DNA sample and compared it against genetic material recovered from earlier crime scenes. The familial match came back with overwhelming certainty. On February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was pulled over in what appeared to be a routine traffic stop near his home. He was calm at first, and then the realization hit him. 30 years of hiding, 30 years of a double life, 30 years of believing he was smarter than everyone around him. All of it gone by the side of a road in Park City. He was arrested without incident. Chapter 5: The Man Behind the Mask. In court, Rader confessed in extraordinary detail. He described each murder methodically, in a flat, clinical tone that many observers found more disturbing than any outburst could have been. No remorse, no visible emotion. Just a kind of residual pride, as if even in confessing, he was still performing. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms, the maximum possible as Kansas had abolished the death penalty before his crimes were committed. He is still in prison today. But the part of this story that lingers isn't the crimes, and it isn't even how long he went undetected. It's the life he built around it all. His neighbors didn't know. His colleagues didn't know. His own family had no idea. For decades, people who saw him every single day looked at one of the most prolific killers in American history and saw nothing unusual whatsoever. Just Dennis. A bit strict. A bit self-important. Harmless. The real horror of BTK was never the monster hiding in the shadows. It was the man at the church council meeting, taking notes, driving home in the dark. The one you would never have thought to look at twice. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed this story, then press the subscribe button so that you don't miss future crime stories.